Fernan Fellenberg, young lord of House Fellenberg, the most prosperous family in the army and empire, was a student in the Imperial Academy's Department of Magic. He came from a solid top-tier education. On top of that, the guy was born rich. Life handed him everything from the start. Obsessed with money, he tells everyone that nothing in this world is more valuable than cash. He used to spend his days talking to merchants. While talking is one way to put it. He actually spent his time chewing out the poor guys who couldn't hit their targets, which, by the way, he always expected to be doubled. But like the saying goes, trouble comes out of nowhere. One day, he was talking to a servant about a certain merchant who wasn't really improving much, even though the guy claimed his sales had increased a lot. Fernan agreed, but still didn't think it was enough. And right then, out of nowhere, the guy gets struck by lightning. Just like that. The shock was so intense that his expression got all twisted. And in that exact moment, a soul approached him. He asked who it was, while the soul smiled happily, thrilled to have found someone to possess. Suddenly, this big hand reached for his head and started pouring some incomprehensible stuff into him. Fernan instinctively knew it was trying to take over his body. He gathered a bit of mana to launch an attack. And even though the thing came in like thunder, surprisingly, it wasn't that hard to push it away. Still, a part of it had been absorbed into his body. And at that moment, unfamiliar memories started flooding his mind. Fernan opened his eyes in panic, and someone asked if the young lord was okay. He looked completely scorched. Hard to say he was doing fine. Then strange writings began to appear in front of him. Prophesies about the end of a world, the arrival of 72 demons, him getting kicked out of his family. On top of that, he'd end up a beggar and lose all his money. The kid's future was worse than anything he'd imagined. Losing the whole world, sure, that was bad. But going broke, that was just unbearable. From that day on, he started trying to figure out what had happened, what that thing was that tried to possess him, and how those memories ended up inside him. Unfortunately, he never found any real answers. But one thing he was sure of, there was a very good chance that those prophecies might actually come true. Why? Because ever since he received those memories, he'd been using them to make tons of money. The problem was, he wasn't happy about it, because that meant the memories were probably real. And if they were, then one day he'd lose everything. He offers him a cup of coffee, but Fernan turns it down. He picks up a little newspaper, takes a glance, and the guy keeps an eye on him. Then he asks if the kid's been feeling weird lately, and Fernan says no. But the guy's certain something's off. He's been looking seriously troubled for about half a year now. Out of nowhere, Fernan just starts drooling like he's lost in some random thought. And lately, he's been making impulsive decisions, which is totally unlike him, since he used to be the king of negotiation. The guy is sure it's got something to do with that lightning strike. Fern stays quiet, lost in thought. He doesn't want to admit it, but all that happened back then is still eating away at him, because he knows full well he's going to end up a beggar. That's when he spots a name in the paper, Ain't Armenian. And just like that, he gets pissed. The bastard had actually shown up. Fernan storms off, saying he's heading south. The guy just stands there, confused, thinking this kid's really not all there lately. The Imperial Academy sits on a remote island, massive and vast, but definitely built entirely with magic. Everything there is artificial, no doubt about it. Still, our boy is there today because it's finally time to find out whether the prophecy is true. Out of everything that was written in that prophecy, 3 parts stood out the most to him. The part where he loses all his money, the part where he becomes a beggar, and that third part, Yakin, where he ends up broke. Those 3 futures alone already felt unbearable. Well, actually, there's more to it. There's one version of the future where he becomes a beggar, sure, but there's also another where 72 demons from the Solomon River invade the land. And then there's a third thing that happens, Armenian, the one who's destined to save the world from those demons. That name is known across the whole empire. Why? Because he's a direct descendant of Emperor Calinus Armenian. House Armenian are literally the ones who founded this entire place. That was 1,000 years ago though, and nowadays they've lost all the power they once had. Still, the prophecy clearly states that the one known as an Armenian is the protagonist of the story. After passing the entrance exam for the school, he comes to this region to follow a map given to him by the emperor. From that moment on, he enters the academy and countless events unfold, all of which were written in that novel Fernan got implanted in his mind. Which means that if Fernan runs into that guy here, the prophecies have to be real. But the reason he's looking for A isn't just because he's the prophecy hero. He's also tied directly to Fernand's miserable future. He's the one who hands over the letter saying Fernand's been expelled from school. And the worst part, Fernand has no clue why that bastard was responsible for his downfall. All the text said was that Armine saw Fernand Fellenberg as something. It wasn't clear. But because of that, he found him repulsive. With writing vague and twisted, there's no way to know what caused what. But on the surface, it seemed to be something about Fernand siding with demons or something along those lines. He hops off his course, looks around, and asks if this is the place. There was supposed to be a dungeon left behind by the first emperor of the Armine family. Inside it, there was said to be a sword that held the spirit of Royal Knight Gardner, assuming the book was right. That sword is what A would use to begin his fight against the demons. If it weren't for that boy's destiny to save the world, Fernand would have already killed him. Especially since that guy is the one responsible for the future where Fernand ends up on the streets. But right then, he smells something strange. Blood. He glances to the side and sees a plant stained bright red. Just like the story said, he ran into a croaker before finding the dungeon. These creatures are the apex predators of the swamps. And Fernand, who had just joined the academy, didn't stand a chance. And with that, it was becoming more and more clear. The prophecy was starting to come true. Just as Fernand decides to take a look inside the dungeon, that bastard Ain't Armine suddenly shows up right in front of him. Fernand immediately asks what he's doing there instead of taking the academy's entrance exam like he's supposed to. A wants to know how Fernand even knows who he is, and Fernand replies that everyone knows who the descendant of the emperor is. But the blonde kid has no idea who Fernand is. Fernand introduces himself, and it seems like he doesn't have the best reputation. The blonde kid gets startled and asks if he's that infamous Fernandin Fellenberg. Fernand's expression drops a bit and he tells him to show some respect. Then he asks if he's hurt because he fought a croaker. A says yes, he's covered in blood.